Christmas morning, and I thought that we'd play with some toys. You see, a long time ago, I did a Puppet Master timeline, and I also did an update, but there's been several episodes since then, so I thought it was a good time to redo that and put them all together. So here's my gift to you guys, whether you celebrate or not. And for this timeline to work out, we're gonna need a Christmas miracle.
Our journey begins back in 1989 with Puppet Master from Full Moon Productions. It kicks off on the California coast, and this hotel isn't here because this part is actually in Pasadena. It's 1939 and we see the first puppet, Shredder Khan, moving around and then see Andre Toulon making a jester puppet whose head spins around. Two men in black are approaching, followed by another puppet, Blade, who warns Toulon, who packs the toys up in a crate and then shoots himself. It then jumps to present day at Yale, so presumably 1989, and Paul Lamont is here. And the only reference I have for him is the voice of Omar from Rock and Rule, but that's a bit more out there. And then Barbara Crampton pops in for a second, and we meet several psychics that all have terrifying visions. They're all called out to the Bodega Bay Inn, and their friend Neil is dead, and they meet his wife, Megan. That night, the Pinhead puppet appears, crawling out of Neil's casket, and at dinner, they discuss the fact that their dead friend was a pretty terrible person. Also, each of them has a unique psychic ability, and spooky stuff starts happening, including the housekeeper getting clubbed on the head with a fire poker. And later that night, the crew go into action, including Tunneler, who has this drill on his head that he uses to kill a woman. We then meet Leech Woman, and as the name implies, her mouth opens wide and she spits leeches on you. And I guess they're like super leeches, because having some leeches on you wouldn't kill you. Next, Pinhead shows up and gets tossed down the stairs, so Blade finishes the job. Alex is the only psychic left, and of course it's revealed that Neil is alive after all, and everyone else is dead. He says that he killed himself and then used Toulon's secrets to return to life, and plans to discard the puppets in favor of experimenting on humans. Teresa appears, reanimated, and then literally vanishes and is never seen nor mentioned again. Neil tosses Jester, which pisses off the puppets, and they start to attack him, tearing him to shreds. Alex packs up and goes home, leaving Megan to the hotel, but it's revealed that she's now the new Puppet Master. 1 year later, in 1990, the first sequel would arrive with Puppet Master 2, and it shows a graveyard with a headstone of someone who died in '85. So we're past that, and the puppets are digging up Toulon's grave. They use the reanimation formula on him, which seems to work, and then we're back at the inn. A new group of paranormal researchers are there, and they say that Alex saw something there that drove him out of his mind. And hey, it's the sweet velvety sounds of the voice of Buck Flowers. The kooky Camille also shows up at the house, and when they investigate the cemetery, we get our first big continuity gaffe, since Toulon's grave says that he died in 1941, whereas the first film placed his death in 1939. We're told that Megan has died and that her brain was extracted through her nose, and after her death, the inn went to the state, and Alex is in an asylum, suspected of having something to do with Megan's death. Because of this, it's clear that some time has passed in between the two films, but it's not said exactly how much. Meanwhile, we see Toulon creating a new puppet, and Camille gets freaked out and decides to leave, but is attacked before she can. Tunneler kills a guy, and they're able to stop him, opening him up. But then, the invisible freaking man shows up and says that he lives there. And later on, the puppets go to kill the hillbillies down the road, but Leech Woman is caught and set in the fire, killing her. We're then introduced to new puppet Torch, who can shoot flames out of his hand, and the bandage guy was clearly Andre Toulon resurrected, and he's collecting brain juice for his reanimation fluid, and doesn't seem bummed that Leech Woman died, which will be important later. He has a flashback to when he was younger, in 1912, and he meets a man in Cairo who shows him his own puppet design and offers him the secret of the reanimation, convinced by his wife Elsa, who bears a shocking resemblance to Carolyn, and he believes her to be her reincarnation. And meanwhile, Torch kills a kid because he was whipping a topless G.I. Joe, which is something that we have all done. The puppets kill off the rest of the group, and Andre takes Carolyn hostage and removes the bandages to reveal a rotted corpse. And he has these dummy bodies ready to accept this life force and slices his own throat, being reborn into this ridiculous thing here. The puppet screwed up, though, and used some animal brains, so he squeals like a pig at times, and Michael shows up to rescue her. The puppets realize that they've been used and turn on their master once again, breaking him up into little pieces and setting him on fire. He falls out the window, becoming oddly transparent as he does, and Michael mourns his mother, Camille. And it turns out that she's been restored into the big doll and is taking the puppets to an institute for troubled teens. Now, this would be the last time that we see her in the films, but this entire storyline was picked up and carried on in the Action Lab comic book series, where Camille would become a main antagonist. Now, her car has an expiration for the registration for February of 91, which makes me think that this is sometime in 1990, between February and the ending of the year, making it between half a year to a year after the first film. Things rolled on as 1 year later, in 1991, a third entry was unveiled with Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, which opens up in Berlin in 1941. And creepy-ass Richard Lynch is here as a Nazi named Kraus, and he's forcing Doc Hess here to try to find a way to reanimate dead people. And we meet Toulon, now recast as a guy who knows his way around dolls. But wait a minute, this is 1941.
But didn't he shoot himself 2 years ago?
Yeah.
One of his fans is Aaron Eisenberg from Amityville, The Evil Escapes, and he had the amazing ability to be both 13 years old and 40 at the same time. Andre's show is frowned upon because it shows Hitler in a bad light, and his wife probably belongs in the Phantom Zone, and he has a new puppet, although I guess new is relative considering that this is a prequel, and it's Six Shooter here, an American cowboy with 6 arms. Kraus and Spinach Chin find out about the puppets and tell their superior, who I guess is a Nazi, but it's weird because I'm so used to this guy being a Russian in the Bond flicks. They kidnap Andre and kill Elsa, but the puppets fight back and he gets free. He decides to get revenge on those that killed his wife, and the guys go into action, while Andre injects a puppet based on Elsa with his formula, which for some reason alters its face and hair, and it becomes Leech Woman. Michelle Bauer pops in for a second, and we see Six Shooter in play, killing the general, and I guess his tiny guns have full-size bullets? But then they find the bullet and comment how small it is, but I guess they act like a full-size one? Toulon reveals that his puppets are all his friends killed by Nazis, and their souls are put into the dolls, and the secret of the new life is that they wanted to come back, and Peter's father sells them out and gets shot for his troubles. Hess is also killed, and Andre once again flashes back to 1912 as Toulon catches up with Kraus, introducing a brand new puppet made in his image, Blade, who is infused with the essence of Hess. They turn him into a giant puppet with ropes and hooks, and Andre and Peter set off to Switzerland and say America is next. So the implication here is that he's on the run from Nazis, and that this leads directly into the opening of Puppet Master 1. So, with the tombstone from Part 2 and this movie, I think that the intro there is meant to be 1941, and not 1939, which would make this line up properly. 2 more years passed, and in 1993 we saw the release of Puppet Master 4 and meet this big demon thing named Sutek. And he says that the secret of reanimation is theirs, and that Toulon had stolen it. And oh, by the way, he has really funky nipples. Come to think of it, this dude's chest looks like a weird set of eyes and goofy teeth. Back on Earth, a mysterious man delivers a box to a biotech company, although you'd think it was OCP because Johnson is there, and inside the box is this little demon doll. It comes to life and kills the doc, and we then meet Rick, who is at the Bodega Bay Inn and working on these robot things that he plays laser tag with. Of course, the puppets are still there, watching him, and he works for that biotech place, and some friends come up to visit him. One of them is TV's Chandra West, and another is television's Ash Adams. And Rick says that it's off-season at the end, so it may be open once more, and he's the caretaker. And a second totem kills the other doc. They find Blade and shortly after locate the trunk, opening it up to find Klaus's passport and a diary placing the ending of Part 3 in April of 1941, and also discovering the inert puppets. Weirdly, 6-Shooter is in there as well after being missing from the crate for Parts 1 and 2. He finds Blade, Pinhead, Tunneler, 6-Shooter, and Jester, and although Torch is on the poster and box art, he's absent here. Rick does what anyone would do when you discover magical animated puppets in an old dusty crate in a hotel attic. He puts lasers on their arms and plays laser tag. In the trunk is also now a Ouija board looking thing that Lauren here decides to use, but when she does, 2 totems appear and attack. So her and Cameron decide to leave. One of the little guys is in the car though, and the license plate has a registration tag of 1993, but I can't see the month. But it's off-season, so I assume it's wintertime, unless the inn is a ski place, but I doubt that a lot. So this is either late 92 or early 93, and they kill Cam. Meanwhile, the puppets capture another totem, and Tunneler kills him, which destroys his counterpart in Sutek's realm. The crew then finds another box and opens it up to find another puppet and rig it up like Frankenstein. The totems try to interfere, but one is electrocuted, and Decapitron morphs into Toulon, once again played by Guy Rolfe, and tells Rick he needs the formula. The final totem attacks, but Susie hits it with acid, and the burnt guy attacks, but Decapitron awakens and blasts it, leaving Sutek defeated. Toulon appears again and tells Rick he's the new puppet master, and without any other concrete evidence, let's use that license plate to put it in real-time 1993. The following year, 1994, saw Puppet Master 5 and was originally released with the subtitle The Final Chapter. But we all know that that's woefully inaccurate, as those words final chapter always are. We find out that Rick has been arrested and blamed for the deaths of both the hotel and the lab, so it's very clear this is shortly after the last one. And we get a recap of Part 4, and Blade is taken in as evidence. Rick's questioned by the head of the biotech company, and he tries to tell him what's going on while Blade escapes. Rick makes bail and goes back to Susie while Sutek unveils a new totem that he can put himself into. Jennings meets with his higher-ups, which includes someone from Unita Medical Supply, and he decides to break into the inn with the help of Dwayne Whitaker. And hey, both Clue and Dwayne would later be in Feast together, but they share no scenes here. There's a calendar up on the wall, and it's for May, and the days of the week line up with that of 1992. And so it seems like that's when this is taking place, with the 4th film happening shortly before this, and that registration expiring in the first couple of months of 1993. Lauren is back too, and in the hospital, but back at the hotel, the Sutek totem appears and starts to kill off the intruders. Then, this is weird, Rick gets back to the inn and spots the puppet and asks where's Pinhead and Jester, but Torch is just there, and Rick recognizes him and calls him by name. So sometime in between these two films, I guess he found him and restored him as well. The boys face off against the totem, but it has laser blast powers, and they find out that Lauren is using psychic abilities to talk to them through the computer, and they find and restore Decapitron, who tells them to leave while he fights the totem. Jennings tries to double-cross Rick and steals the puppets, so they end up killing him, then take on Sutek, and Decap uses what he says is the magic to launch the totem across the room. Although, to be fair, he's helped by these very obvious strings here. It tries to escape, but they manage to overload it, and he explodes. The puppets are all damaged in the aftermath, and Susie goes for a jog.
Hour and 22. How many miles?
15. Even better than yesterday.
For the record, 15 miles in 82 minutes is about a mile each 5.5 minutes, which would make Susie here one of the fastest women in history.
Toulon prepares Rick for more adventures, and he's still the reigning puppet master. It took a 4-year break, but the little guys came back in 1998 with another entry entitled Curse of the Puppet Master. It begins with the crew captured in cages at a doll museum, and it's weird because Leech Woman is here, but Torch isn't, and Six Shooter is. So you're tempted to say that it's before Leech Woman died, but Six Shooter wouldn't be there then. They're being held by Dr. McGrew here, who has a daughter, and when he goes to town, we see Tank here being picked on by the local bullies. And the doc hires him based on his wood-carving skills, and introduces him to the puppets. He says that he bought the trunk at an auction years ago, so this is several years after the last movie, given that there was a 4-year gap between the two movies, and those took place in 92. So it's possible that this is real-time 98 and 6 years may have passed. The police are looking for the doc's former assistant who has gone missing, and Tank starts a carving and is soon plagued by nightmares in which he's becoming a puppet. When one of those bullies show up to attack Jane, the boys spring into action and Pinhead is hurt. That night though, McGrew takes Blade and Tunneler to Joey's house where, bear with me now, Tunneler tunnels up into the guy's bathing suit area. Tank gets sicker and the cops are checking out Joey's body, and there's a calendar up on the wall that says that it's December of 1998, so that's confirmed, and this is 6 years later and sometime after Part 5. And sometime after Part 5, the trunk was sold off in an auction and McGrew got it. It's presumed that in that time, Leech Woman was reanimated as well. Now, there's some fans that put this one after the second film and before the fourth, sort of explaining where the puppets went after Part 2, but that doesn't line up with him saying that he got it from a trunk, since that was still back at the inn, and his comments about several years, since there's only 2 years between those two movies. The cops go to McGrew's and he sicks the puppets on them, leading to some carnage, and meanwhile, Tank is strapped down in tighty whities, and let me check. The director is David Dakota, and that's his trademark. Jane finds the puppified body of the doc's former assistant, and back at the lab, Tank is quite literally transferred into a robot or puppet. Upon seeing him do this, they decide to turn on the doc, I guess because Tank was innocent. Not totally sure why they turn here, considering that they seem to be aware that he killed other people before this, but they hack him up. But Tank delivers the finishing blow. 1 year later, the train kept rolling with 1999's Retro Puppet Master, which begins in 1944? But wait a minute, Toulon is here, but that makes no sense at all, since that's 5 years after he killed himself in 1939, or 3 years after the ending of the third film, and also when his tombstone and 2 say that he died. The puppets are in the trunk and he's still on the run from the Nazis. So here's the thing. I find it hard to believe that he stayed in that area for 3 years after Part 3, especially because he said that they were on the way to Switzerland and then the US. So I think it's likely that this is actually 1941 still, shortly after Part 3, and that opening date is simply an error. He has another flashback after seeing a puppet head, and it's to Cairo, and this guy named Afzel is stealing Sutek's secrets. So he calls up these mummies. And then it jumps to Paris in 1902, and young Andre, and it's...
Oh, hi, Mark.
He's making puppets, and they're sort of rudimentary versions of the ones that we know, and young Elsa is also here with a friend that I believe is speaking her lines phonetically.
But please be careful, and don't go into any opium dens.
And Andre's show is a take on Dante's Inferno and has this retro version of Blade, Pinhead, Tunneler, and Six Shooter, as well as new puppets Cyclops and Dr. Death. Sutek's crew is hunting Afzel and hires thugs to beat him up, and Andre saves him. In return, he teaches him about the magic to bring them to life, which directly contradicts what we learned in Part 2. And I guess it's possible that that film may have presented a flashback from a damaged mind since Toulon was brought back wrong there, but they also show the same flashback in 3, although it's stated in the Action Lab comic series that he already knew the secret in 1912, but simply kept quiet about it around that merchant guy. Elsa and Andre start a thing up, but they call her Ilsa here, not Elsa. So she maybe changed her name to get away from her controlling father, I guess, but oh man, would he ever be fooled by that one single letter? The mummy guys wipe out all of Toulon's friends, and Affy kills himself to keep out of their reach, and then uses his ring thing to jab their necks and transfer their souls into the dolls. So I guess he doesn't need the brain stuff. So I think he learned this method of reanimation from Afzal and then used it for 10 years until 1912, when he learned the more advanced method from that other guy. They duke it out with Andre winning out, so they kidnap Ilsa, whatever, leading to a face-off on a train where the puppets kill the Sutek guys, and Andre and his lady unite, with older Toulon promising to tell what happened to them at a later date. The saga took another 4-year break, but returned, sort of, with 2003's Puppet Master: The Legacy. We're back at the Bodega Bay Inn, and a mysterious woman reading Toulon's diary, taking us back to 1912, where he says it all began, which is pretty silly considering this is just after a movie contradicting that. But then the diary bursts into flames. She then appears to a man who has the puppets, holding him at gunpoint and asking for the reanimation secret, and he has recordings that he plays. And then we get him talking about 1902, and see a bunch of scenes from that movie, like several minutes of it. And then we learn that the old man is just Peter, grown up, and then get several minutes of Puppet Master 3, because that's all this movie is. It's a clip show collection of scenes from the previous movies. And in between, it said that Peter was sent away after Part 3 and taken in by villagers, and he never saw Toulon again. There's then clips from Part 2 and then on to Part 4, although they refer to Rick as Peter, so I guess that Andre was trying to hide his identity. And McLean reveals that she has already killed him in order to get the diary. So they killed the main character of Parts 4 and 5 off screen. They then go through Curse, and it seems like if that whole Curse comes between 2 and 4 theory were a thing, that Toulon would have said that here. But she then reveals that she's not after the puppets. She instead wants to know how to kill them permanently. She claims that she was sent by puppets who were left behind by Toulon, looking for ways to end their eternal lives in torment. And Peter hears something unseen and shoots it. And that's it. That storyline was never followed up on. So that bizarre entry then takes us to another weird one with 2004's Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys. And it's Christmas time, and we meet little Tommy Jarvis and his teenage daughter. And he has a diary of Old Man Toulon and gives us a whole bunch of exposition really quickly. Seems he found the puppets at a flea market in Paris, and he's meant to be Andre's great-grandnephew. And you know, Feldman was 33 at the time of this film's release, and he has a girl who's supposed to be at least 16, and I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be much, much older than 33 because he has some gray sprinkled in his hair, and he's talking like this, and this kind of voice is what makes you seem old, right?
Not just any blood, dear. Toulon family blood.
TV Weird Science Lisa is here, and she's spying on Robert as he's trying to bring the puppets to life using Toulon family blood, which he calls the most essential ingredient, which is a new method of restoring the puppets, who look markedly different and cheaper, since this was a sci-fi original film and not officially Full Moon. So, Jester, Blade, Pinhead, and Six Shooter are here, and here's the thing. Tunneler, Leech Woman, and Torch are all missing. And then Robert mentions that Toulon's puppets fought Nazis, and this was actually meant to be Puppet Master 4, or at least come out before that film, and the script was from that era. This was intended to follow after the events of the original 3 films, so technically Leech Woman and Tunneler were dead, killed off in the second movie. That doesn't explain Torch's absence, though. The evil Erica Sharp sends a crew to steal the puppets, and they fight back, but get burned in the process. Meanwhile, Sharp is sacrificing a virgin and introduces her to the demonic toys from that other Full Moon franchise. They put the girl in a machine, which calls up a demon, and Robert recalls a meeting he had with Sharper Industries, and for some reason his hair wasn't gray, so I guess the meeting was a long time ago. There's something weird here because there's a license plate that seems to have a sticker dated 92, and the color does match that year. But if it expires in March of 92 and this is Christmas, then I think that this would be December of 91? And it's clear that there's a taped up European license plate behind it, but that date doesn't really make sense with some of the computer technology that they show, particularly the internet access, which was way more limited in 1991, so I think that that's just an outdated sticker. Robert breaks into Sharp, and plenty of people have made fun of how Steven Seagal runs, but how haven't people talked about Corey Feldman's sprinting form? Seriously, what is he doing here? I think he's trying to make it look like he's going fast without actually going fast, but whatever it is, it's hilarious. Toulon revives the puppets, but now they have high-tech robot parts.
They're cooler than ever.
Are they though?
They figure out that Sharp's plan is to put their toys in every house in America and wake them up on Christmas morning to cause chaos, and they have to face off at a factory after kidnapping Alex. Sharp raises the demon Baal, who for some reason is wearing a Santa suit, and he says that her ancestor, a Toulon, sold his soul for the secrets of alchemy, and then he mixed his soul with an old oak tree, and with that oak, the first Toulon puppets were carved, which is, that's probably overcomplicating things, I guess. And the puppets fight the toys complete with lots of farts, and the good guys easily win. And the sun comes up, so Sharp runs out of time, and Baal takes her back with him to his hell dimension. The day is saved, and with no other indication, I'm going to ignore that plate sticker since it doesn't make any sense and put this in real-time 04. It took us another 6 years for the crew to return, but they did in 2010 with Puppet Master Axis of Evil. Technically Puppet Master 9, I guess, since the last entry isn't technically part of the series. It opens with footage from the first film and, damn it, it says that it's 1939 again. And we meet Danny, who's making chairs at the Bodega Bay Inn, and he wishes he was going to war, but has a limp due to polio and can't. They say Toulon is there and recap the third movie. So here's the thing. This is still 1941. We once again see Andre kill himself, but now see what happened next as Danny sees the Nazis leave, and then finds the trunk with the puppets inside, and then heads home, taking it with him. His brother is shipping out, and they find a spot in the trunk with 6-shooter's arms, saying he was in the process of repairing him, which is, I guess, why he wasn't in the first and second movies. Meanwhile, those two Nazis are conspiring with some Japanese spies who are hiding out at the Opera House with plans to take out a manufacturing plant. The puppets now suddenly have these holes on the back of their neck, which is weird because they didn't really have those before, although they did in Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys, but that movie had a different way to bring them to life, so I guess those holes were always there, just kind of hidden? Danny also finds a hidden slot in the trunk with a brand new puppet, Ninja, and the formula, and revives the puppets. He then discovers the Nazi plot and takes the puppets to try to stop it, but the villains figure out where he lives and come there and kill his mother and brother. Danny uses the formula to put Dawn's soul inside the Ninja puppet and heads out to rescue a captured Beth. With the help of the puppets killing the guards, they free her, and Max double-crosses Ozu and is stabbed by Ninja, while she escapes with Tunneler, Jester, and Leechwoman in a bag. Since it ended on a cliffhanger, it was clear that more was coming, and in 2012 that was followed with Puppet Master X, Axis Rising. It begins with a very different looking Ozu, now recast and with different hair and everything, and she meets with Commandant Mobius and offers him the puppets, which I guess the puppet, it's because it's just Tunneler now. And he shoots Ozu dead, and Danny and Beth are back, both recast, and I guess that Leech and Jester are back here too, and Pinhead's shirt is all ripped up with no explanation of how it got that way. They realize that they have to get Tunneler back, and oh yeah, this is right after the last one, so we're still in 1941 by this point, probably pretty late in the year. There's also this guy, Doc Fruhofer, and he's working on his own puppets and is being held by the Nazi cleavage machine, Ushi. They're forcing him to create their own dolls and kill a guy, but it doesn't quite stick because they're missing Toulon's formula. Danny is recruited by the military and saddled with Sergeant Stone here, played by Brad Potts, who I worked with a few times on some industrial films, and I'm sad to say that he passed away just a little earlier this year. Mobius finds Ushi plotting against him and shoots her dead, so Fruhofer decides to bring her back and dissects Tunneler again. Like, can this guy just not get dissected? Jeez. He figures out how to make his own puppets and creates Bombshell using Ushi's soul, and her powers are to have her boobs open up and fire bullets, wounding Pinhead. He's also made Wehrmacht, a werewolf guy, and Blitzkrieg, a tank robot. And then, hold up, wait, what happened to Ninja? Is it dead? Danny doesn't even seem to mention him or feel sad that his brother is dead. Again. And oh yeah, there's another puppet named Kamikaze, I guess. They head out and plan to stop the Nazis along with a now revived six-shooter and find Mobius and have a battle that leaves the Sarge stabbed and Mobius shot down by Sixie, and Kamikaze detonates, destroying their lab. They let Fruhofer go, although he has taken some of the fluid. There was a 5-year gap until the Axis trilogy ended with 2017's Puppet Master Axis Termination. And the beginning tells us that we're in 1942 now, 1 year after the last one, and presumably fixing the timeline error with that 1939 title screen. Danny and Beth are here and they have the trunk, but then this guy just shoots them dead, and just like that, opening 2 minutes, the main characters of the last two movies are dead. But thankfully, Captain Brooks is here to kill their killer and take the trunk. Brooks is paired up with Ivan Ivanov and is told to find out about the Nazi puppets and stop them, and we see that Fruhofer has died of what they say is natural causes. But other Nazis found him and his puppets and prepare to use them for their own needs. Ivanov has a daughter, and they're all psychics, and he's also supposed to be Russian, although I'm not sure what this accent that he's doing is.
Anger, fear, love. I can project them as well.
They find the location of the Nazi hideout and go there, but are attacked by Sturmbannführer, who has a very strong psychic ability and paralyzes all of them, including the puppets. The Nazis also find Ivan's house and attack, but the puppets fight back. There's this girl with syringe fingers, though, and she takes down Pinhead, but luckily Leech Woman spits a leech on Dude's eye, breaking his hold on the gang. But they kidnap Elisa. Ernst double-crosses her boss, and the good guys try to rescue Elisa, but Georgina is shot and killed by Bombshell. Brooks manages to overcome Krabke's powers and knock him down, where Pinhead strangles him while Ivan faces off with Ernst. But her puppets shoot her when they realize that she doesn't care about them, and then uses his power to erase her soul. 1 year later, things took a sharp left turn with the release of 2018's Puppet Master: The Littlest Reich, a remake that was unconnected to the main series. It starts in 1989 as Dragonetti walks into a bar, and his face is scarred and burnt, and encounters a lesbian couple, and later on, they're killed, and Officer Dureski is on hand to investigate. They track him back to his mansion and go in to a shootout. The opening credits show us that this version of Toulon is very different and was in fact a Nazi and would use the puppets to murder Jews in the war, but had to flee Europe afterwards and went to America. It then bounces to what it says is present day, so presumably 2018 then, and Lieutenant Jim Dangle is here. He's recently divorced and moves back home and had a brother that passed away, and in going through his stuff he finds this version of the Blade puppet, And Como is here, and Como knows everyone, and this website is advertising the 30th anniversary of the Toulon murderers, which would place this one in 2019 then. Edgar runs into an old friend from the neighborhood, Ashley, and he works at a comic shop that is advertising Free Comic Book Day for 2017, so he may want to take that old sign down. And he decides to go to the Toulon convention and asks Ashley. They get to the hotel and then immediately head out to Toulon's old place, and Dureski is leading a tour, and she's now a bubble-headed co-ed. And she says that she was the one that shot him that night, 30 years ago, backing up that this is 2019. And showcases his life story and his Nazi paraphernalia, and it said that Toulon made a number of puppets and shipped them out, and around 60 of them will be there at the convention. When they get back to the room, the Blade puppet is missing, and there's another puppet called Kaiser, that's a version of Torch, and he does his thing, and we next see the Blade puppet in action. And there's a new one called Autogyro that can fly, and Charlene Yee pops in, as does Michael Poiret, and there's actually a second Blade puppet here, but this one with a full skull face. There's also another new puppet called the Money Lender, but then a third Blade puppet, this one with no hair. And the police lock down the building, but chaos erupts with the puppets slaughtering everyone in sight. And this version of Pinhead appears. And then there's this book detailing the history and names of some of them, including a couple that we haven't seen yet, like Mr. Pumper and Mechaniker, who shows up shortly after. A man is controlled by another new puppet, Junior Führer, and then Mr. Pumper shows up, and Markowitz is killed. There's another new puppet with Happy Amphibian, and Edgar and Ashley manage to get away, but one of the Blades stabs Dureski. The puppets start attacking the rest of the people at the hotel, including the charming bartender Cuddly Bear, and Edgar and Ashley attack Toulon's mausoleum, disrupting the signal, but waking up the now monstrous Puppet Master. It comes after them, and Edgar cracks its head open, but it pulls out a gun and kills Ashley before just leaving. It then jumps ahead to some time later, and Edgar has made a comic book out of their escapades, and it's successful, and it ends with to be continued. But of course, it never was, because the company that was producing it and had the rights had some controversy and went out of business. But a post-credit scene lets us know that Cuddly Bear lives. Things switched back to Full Moon for the next entry, but it was a bit different because 2020 gave us the solo tale of Blade the Iron Cross. It begins with Elisa returning and having dreams about Blade, and she opens up the trunk. And I guess they repaired Tunneler, and she gets the B-Man, but he looks distinctly larger than before. We then meet Dr. Hauser, yet another Nazi doctor, and he's conducting experiments once more to try to animate the dead. And they say that the war is almost over, and that the Bolsheviks are marching on Berlin. So this is most likely 1945, the final year of World War II. We're in Los Angeles, and this is absolutely not what that looked like in 1945. About half of these buildings weren't there at that point, and Elisa is working here now as a reporter, investigating mysterious bodies showing up, and she has a photographer and is flirtatious with a police detective. And we get a bunch of information from some files. We see Ivan's birth date of 1901, so he's in his mid-40s here, and oh boy, the misspellings. We have complexion, Leningrad, and Professor all misspelled here. And then a report on the puppets from January of 1945. So yeah, we're in early 45 here, post-March. And Elisa sees that Blade's blade is dull and sharpens it, but cuts herself. This, I guess, bonds the two, and she's able to give up some of her energy to him so that he can come to life and kill the guy who's stalking her. And you know, it kind of looks like the part of Blade is being played by Robert Zadar here. And the Nazis are after the Scroll of Osiris. And Elisa and Joe are gassed and captured, and their plan is to use a death ray to kill half of California that will come back as zombies devoted to the Nazis. And they torture Elisa, but she instead supercharges Blade, and he slices them up, and their zombie experiments get loose as well. But it's revealed that Hauser has a robot arm, and he tries burning Blade and then smashes him with a sledgehammer. However, he's seemingly fine, completely reformed from the excess bioenergy, and bursts out of him. They destroy the Death Ray, and the news gives us the definite date of October of 1945, and there's an article saying that Brooks from Axis Termination is going back to the front, which is weird because this is October and the war ended in September, so I'm not sure who he's going to fight, but I guess it's Halloween, and his mind is playing tricks on him. Joe reveals that he knows his boss is a traitor who sold him out, and Blade is there to take him out. The most recent entry came out in 2022 with Puppet Master Dr. Death, another solo entry, and the first film since 1999 to feature any of the retro designs. It opens with a man dreaming about the puppet and then dying, and then a young woman named April starting work at the retirement home where he passed. She meets her co-workers and they find an old trunk in the dead guy's room, and inside is the Dr. Death puppet. And she then meets some of the residents there, including Melissa Moore, the girl from that one scene in Repossessed. And I'm a little flustered that they put Melissa freaking Moore into a senior citizen center. Like in real life, she's 60 years old, which is not exactly what I would call a senior. Like she doesn't even qualify for the benefits. The center has some odd tastes in magazines, considering they stocked up on old Fangorias, and the puppet starts to just show up around the home. And there's a monthly planner up on the wall here, and it says October, and the days of the week line up with 2020, so it's possible that that's our date here. And later, the doc removes this woman's breathing tube and kills her. Next, he takes out the funeral director, and based on the old Fangos everywhere, the old cars everyone seems to have, the lack of any cell phones and tech, and the VHS boxes, I think it's possible that this is set in the past, actually, and the corpse of Dorothy seems to be appearing, and the killings continue. With the corpses coming back at times, and the doc kills Ryan and bursts out of a dude, and soon, only April is left alive, and she reveals that she's the great-great-granddaughter of the human soul that animated him, and that she's been looking for him and wants to help him find the rest of the crew. So, there's no other indication of the film, but I play horror trivia with the director of this one, so I just point blank asked him, and he told me that it is meant to take place after the events of Puppet Master 2 and before Part 4. And the online wiki puts this in 1993, although I have the fourth film in 1992. Although, to be fair, either one works. So that's all the entries, although there was supposed to be another solo film called Furnace Leech Woman, but according to the director, it looks as if that was canceled. That one appears to have been meant to pick up after the ending of Part 2, and I guess follow Leech Woman as she is restored to life after being burnt in that furnace. Besides that, though, there's other media out there. Of course, there's several comic book series. The first one coming out all the way back in 1990 and arrived between the first and second film. It ran for 4 issues and then had a short 2-issue follow-up called The Children of the Puppet Master. Much later, Action Lab Comics picked up the license and did a 20-plus issue take that picked up the story and fleshed it out like a bit of the lore of the franchise and was pretty cool. There were also action figures, lots and lots of action figures of almost every single puppet featured in the series, and now those are pretty hard to track down, plus cards and models. There's also a video game that was in the works for a long time, but is now available to play and lets you control a number of the puppets, and more are planned to be added through DLC.
So, look, that's pretty confusing, right? Okay, let's recap and put it all in chronological order.
First is Retro Puppet Master, which takes place in 1902, and Toulon learns how to bring puppets to life. Later, in 1912, as we'll see in flashbacks, he learns a more sophisticated method of doing this. Next, in 1941, we see the events of Puppet Master 3, in which Elsa is killed and the Blade and Leech Woman puppets are born. Also in 1941, that opening sequence from Retro takes place as Toulon flees Switzerland. Later in 1941, we get the intro to Puppet Master 1 as Toulon shoots himself. Later in 1941, we get the intro to Puppet Master 1 as Toulon shoots himself in America, and right after that, the events of both Axis of Evil and Axis Rising occur. 1 year later, in 1942, Axis Termination happens, and then in 1945, it's the Blade solo film. After that, it appears as if the puppets were returned to Bodega Bay Inn, where they'd sit until Neil Gallagher found them for the events of the first movie in 1989, and shortly after, the second film occurred in 1990. Now, here's where it gets contentious, because some people say the Curse of Puppet Master happens now, and I have no problem with that, but I myself believe it happens later. But Dr. Death absolutely does take place at this point, at either 92 or 93. The puppets return to the hotel for parts 4 and 5 in 1992, and then, based on that calendar, ends up in the hands of Doc McGrew by 1998 in Curse. Legacy takes place in 2003, so it's next, leaving that one as the final entry in the main series. But if you want Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys to be in continuity, it's certainly possible to do so, with it taking place afterwards in 2004. The last entry chronologically, although it's not in the main timeline, is The Littlest Reich, taking place in 2019.
So there you have it. 14 Puppet Master movies. That's a lot of movies. And yeah, if you ignore some of the little misprints and the details that they have that they clearly got wrong, the timeline does kind of make sense once you kind of figure out where they all fit in there, which, I did in my chronological thing. If you watch it in that way, it will sort of make sense. And then, if you want Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys to be there, fine. If you want Littlest Reich to be there, you can't. That one doesn't really fit. But tell me which one of these you enjoyed the most. Tell me if you enjoy these movies. If you want to see more, if you're done with the franchise, tell me in the comments down there below. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like. If you enjoy what you see on the channel, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. And if you think about it, get me a little holiday gift by going to patreon.com/movietimelines, where you can help support this channel like these guys do. I appreciate them. I appreciate you guys. And one last thing, because it is the holiday, I want to make sure that you guys, no matter what holiday you celebrate, no matter what you do, how you celebrate, when you celebrate, here in our house we are celebrating the pagan ritual of Flagluglen, and it's a very merry day for us as well. So I would like to wish you guys a happy Flagluglen, and we'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks guys, and bye-bye! Happy holidays!
Like and subscribe.